And welcome to the sixth Midstream reading on Zoom. It's extending a decade long, nearly decade long series. And I'm Mimi Jennings, your moderator this evening, and Paul Mattis is our tech host. And thank you, Paul. I'll begin with a statement about this land. While we have wide geographical representation tonight, the land we zoom from near the meeting of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers, Bedote, sacred to the Dakota First People, has never been ceded by them. We still live on their land. So just a recognition or an acknowledgement of that fact. And I'll say a little bit about Frank, although I had already given you his bio, but Frank is a longtime friend and colleague of mine, and he is also both performed at high levels in both jazz, and classical music, and he's composed, and he has founded ensembles, ongoing performing ensembles, and he's down there in Orlando, Florida. Midstream customarily meets on the second Thursday of the month, as established by our late founder, David Shove. So December 10th, hosted by Richard Terrell, Lucas Ray Hall, Jean Prockett, Lynette Riney Randell, and Thomas R. Smith will read. And then a little housekeeping. We will be all muted until the end. So please use the chat, use your hands as we have been, and the emojis from the reactions tab at the bottom at your tray to show your appreciation. And then at the end, we will all be unmuted and then noise is appropriate. Okay. And also the people who are reading may or may not have books for sale, and that information is available in the chat. So make sure you follow what's going on in the chat as well. For my part, I'll offer you two poems, one written 2 days before the election and one 2 days after, and I think you'll be able to tell which is which. Stew. Carrots, garlic, doom, stomach, wary head, grim throat, gut of dread, onions, and potatoes. Best knife, purple turnips, dapple, sun, shoulder stab, stoop, stock, oven. Sorrow, shade, worry, brown in oil, thyme, mushrooms, salt, cast iron, slow cook. Window, wing, suet feeder, walking shoes, out, closed door behind. And then, although we do live in grim times, COVID plus winter bodes rough, but we live and we hope. So here's one along those lines. The title is from a 200-page meditation by Gertrude Stein. Make merry because it is so. Charmed, make rhubarb, cherry, make cheery masks, chime for now in heyday. Make yes, dance for all the berries, the charming fruit in chiming time. Make merry, make tea, make slow. Chime because enough, because time, because underhum. From before time, charming and merrymaking went on because now, and undertakers. Dance, charmed, because dancers, cheerful and masked, fleeting, marking cherry time, underline the undertone. Understand what is so for all time, unease and merrymaking. Time chiming, masks, cherries, and yes. That's my bit. And now we have, thank you. Tonight's first invited reader. Her name is Arleta Little, and she's a poet and writer whose literary work can be found in Blues Vision, African American Writing from Minnesota, 2015. And Hope in the Struggle, a memoir of the life of Dr. Josie Johnson, 2019. Arleta is an arts program officer and director of the Artist Fellowships at the McKnight Foundation. Prior to working in philanthropy, she served as the executive director of the Givens Foundation for African American Literature, dedicated to advancing and celebrating African American literature and writers. Committed to advancing racial equity and justice, she currently serves on the boards of the Headwaters Foundation for Justice and Grant Makers in the Arts. Arleta.
Thank you, Mimi and Frank. I miss live music so much. Your playing just brought joy to my heart. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be part of this Midstream reading series and to be in the company of such august poets and audience members this evening. You know, in the midst of all the darkness of this year, I do believe we are in a period of deep foment, where new possibilities are sparking and smoldering, and where new worlds and new ways are being born, and ancient and ancestral ways are stepping forward to reclaim space. To start this evening, I've been inspired to choose two poems that discuss the birthing of new worlds. The first, a personal and individual world, and the second, a collective one. And then I'll finish out my time with a series of meditations. Birth of a goddess. Folded, she places pinches of dirt and ash between pursed lips. Seated and swollen, she claws the earth. Drawn forward by terrestrial warmth, deeper by a nameless knowing, she tunnels, enfolding herself, probing the dark, burrowing blind, sniffing with a star nose, catching the scent of celestial dust, of minerals, of water, of roots and regeneration, odors of love made in hollows of undulating ground. Ancestors pass through to progeny at the apex of her inversion. From a womb veined with remembrance, she crowns. Now anew moist, rendering the flailing muscular mud of a world made in her image. The second poem is titled Kusunoki. It was published online by the St. Paul Almanac in June of this year after the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent uprisings. Kusunoki is one of the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. It's the Swahili word for self-determination that requires that we define our common interest and make decisions that are in the best interest of our families, our communities, our planet, and life itself. Kusunoki. For this beloved community, we steep in the literature and music of movements. For this, we keep clear in mind and body and with each other. For this, we are leaders, positional and otherwise, exercising our power with and without permission. For this, we show up to our work, to create, to change, to resist, to regenerate, to preserve, and to pay forward. For this, we were born, are called, and have trained. For this, we recognize the relevance of our history and we write our future with our own hands. In a similar vein, this next piece is a series of meditations called Truth, Reconciliation, and 4 more meditations on human freedom. It will be included in the anthology More Than a Single Story, edited by Carolyn Holbrook and David Murrah, and set to be published by the University of Minnesota Press in 2021. These meditations are inquiries, reflections, experiments, practices that involve the creation of new origin stories, a recognition of diverse ways of knowing, an assumption of more profound responsibilities, new ways of encountering the sacred within ourselves and others, and for making the conscious choice to show up, to live, to work, and to struggle in community. Truth, Reconciliation, and 4 more meditations on human freedom. 1, becoming. What within us is working itself out? Dreams, yearnings, genetic predispositions, perspectives, and reactions learned in childhood in various conditions. We carry so much within. What are we manifesting? What do we intend? Could a disruption or an intervention work to our advantage? And how can the grind of work become the grace of play? There was a moment when this universe burst forth into being from the fecund void, as it was called by ancients and ancestors, or from dark matter, as present-day scientists say. Some interiority previously unobserved manifested in a new material form. The world as we know it ripened into being, and categorical departures have been part of its progression. From darkness to light, from inert to living, from bud to bloom, and now we, in the truth of our lives, playing ourselves out. 2, truth. Many resources can inform our inquiry, but answers are the dialectical work of each individual soul. We can listen to our intuition, open to the guidance of ancestors, read the works of spiritual teachers, sacred texts, and philosophers, recite the words of poets, and tell the stories of everyday people. We can research the latest science, interrogate our lived experience, talk to friends, family, colleagues, and from this, we make our meaning. We must forge our unique expressions in this creative enterprise called life. From this, we enter into sacred partnership with the Spirit. 3, sacred practice. We belong to life. We practice love. Rooting in life and love secures our foundations. From here, we subvert perverse paradigms in politics, countering callousness with care, countering greed with generosity, countering consumerism with connectedness, countering all forms of lovelessness. Maturity is an embodiment and an enactment of love in service to life. This is the movement. This is how we recognize progress, both personal and political. This is the incendiary practice of the sacred. 4, victory in the fire. In that moment before all hell breaks loose, we can find our peace. We are told that in battle we find out what we're made of, but that's not the whole story. Before battle, in the consciousness of what is possible, there is cultivation, morning after morning of waking up to the life that no one else can live for us. We are careening without complete control over the changes and conditions of our circumstances, but we can know for ourselves what is necessary for integrity, what state of being we will choose to embody. Indeed, all other preparations are incomplete without this. Most human conflict falls short of the love offering that it could be. For our part, we are aware that there is an emergence afoot. This may be the end of the world as we know it, but our choice is to be reconciled with this moment. So we gather ourselves, rise, and go out to greet our guest. 5, reconciliation. I am here at my own risk. I am here honoring the history of my hurt and anger, recognizing that more than hurt and anger are possible. I am here to bear witness to your becoming, to witness the work that I cannot do for you, to welcome you to witness the work that you cannot do for me, but we can meet each other. This creative opportunity will be what we make it, and will be only as limited as we are. We can be present for possibilities, and we can be as wild as our imaginations. Herein lies the ability to create the world anew. 6, community. We have common interests. We have common needs. If the existing structures do not meet our interests or our needs, how then shall we organize? If we rest in the knowledge that we are the alternative, that we resist, if we resist the temptations of authoritarianism and centralization, what then becomes possible in the imagination of we the people? Jazz, cultivated and spontaneous, self-serving, self-regulating, self-governing networks, experimentation, evolution, a multiverse of activity, actions small and large that contribute to the collective vitality. The collective vitality, not organization for the perpetuity of organization, but organization as an expression, a becoming, as a conscious exercise of our power on our own behalf. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Arleta. Michael Bazzett's fourth collection, The Temple, was published by Bull City Press in 2020, and his fifth book of poems, The Echo Chamber, is forthcoming from Milkweed Editions in 2021. His work has appeared in The Sun, the American Poetry Review, the Iowa Review, Three Penny Review, and Plowshares. And his verse translation of the Mayan creation epic, The Popol Vuh, Milkweed 2018, was named one of that year's 10 best books of poetry by the New York Times. Michael.
Thanks, Mimi. And thanks, Arleta, and to the other readers, and Frank for the beautiful music, and Paul for getting us here. I'd like to take just a brief second to have everyone imagine, I think there's 60 people here right now, and what it feels like to have 60 people in a room together. Think of a very small country church, or, you know, a back room at a bar, and how we can still conjure that community. It's not the same. I get it. You know, I can't quite, I want to reach out, but it's lovely that we can be here. And this is the first time I've read from the Temple. It looks kind of like a little stealth hymnal. I love that they managed to do the gold leaf. I want to be able to drop it off in churches so no one knows that, you know, it doesn't belong there. And the epigram to the book, which I think does a pretty good job of centering it, is by W.S. Merwin, who's one of my favorite poets. It said, "If you find you no longer believe, enlarge the temple." I simply love that quote. And I think it fits in some ways with what Arleta was saying too. So here we go. The first poem is entitled simply God. Look, it's not that I believe in him, nor he in me. We have moved beyond all that. I just like having someone there in the dark. Usually we sit in silence, waiting for passing headlights to glide across the ceiling and knock the stray prayers loose from where they got stuck on their way out so many years ago. It's almost like finding old piñata candy, says God, picking one from the floorboards. He unwraps it, takes a quick taste, winces, nods like he's just remembered something for the thousandth time. What is it? I ask. It's kind of like chewing tinfoil, he says. All that aching, naked hope. This next poem is called The Empty City. I went to the doctor and found out there's an empty city inside me. The streets are broad and mostly clean. Trees are few and far between. No cars are parked on the boulevards. Why has it been abandoned, this city? Who used to live here and why did they rush off to the countryside? I admit I was distressed by the news. I had hoped for a mist-cloaked wilderness, or at least a ragged branch of crows. Instead, I wander silent apartments. The closets brim with winter clothes. Now I lie awake and wonder, what will they do when the winds of November come and bite through their thin summer dresses? One of the things I've always enjoyed doing as a poet is rewriting old stories. When I translate, of course, you just have to translate, and occasionally, as in my last book, I rewrote Lazarus. In this book, I thought I'd take a crack at Cain and Abel. I've always kind of wondered about that story. So this is called Cain and Abel Revisited. So the first death on earth was murder, and it was God who spurred it, pitting one against the other, then proclaiming he preferred the smell of meat crackling and spattering on the fire. Wood smoke won out over eggplant. Huge shock, that. We all have to make sacrifices, muttered God when I showed him my initial draft. Then he let the paper fall to the tablecloth and looked out the window at the snow dropping slow as tired hands in the dusk. He poured a little more cognac and said he'd probably do some things differently, given the chance. His dog approached the table then and thrust her bearded chin against God's thigh, wagging her tail as his hand cupped her head. And he began to slowly knead the skin behind her ears. She closed her eyes, and God relaxed a bit. Best thing I ever did, he said, was to make this skull fit so snug within a human hand. My dog does feature somewhat prominently in this poem. This was all written before the pandemic, but it's amazing how close we've become over these past months. He's also far more fit. He's getting 4 or 5 walks a day now. This is called I Enter into the Cold. I thought I'd read it today when I saw the snow start dropping, and I thought pretty soon Harriet's going to be frozen. I live a few blocks from Lake Harriet in South Minneapolis. And my dog is always so happy when it freezes because suddenly it's one of the largest dog parks in the world and we can just wander out there and he can be off leash. I enter into the cold and walk to the lake and then out across it, looking for something to bless, maybe a hole grown closed after the ice fisherman left and dragged his auger home on a sledge. Maybe the smattering of silver minnows he cast aside, wide-eyed, frozen hard as glass. Maybe the hard afternoon light scraping low across the scalded crusts of snow. Maybe something, anything that I could offer here that would make us feel that there's a marvelous truth in looking. But my dog is not looking and finds instead the space unexpectedly open and calling to him, and he runs and he carves huge circles into this temporary vastness on spring-coiled legs that are also temporary. And with every passing minute, the engines of his body incinerate roughly 7 minutes of mine. And the heat this makes rises in white huffs from his lungs. And I stop looking to bless, to be blessed, to do anything but listen to my animal burn the air into a kind of living smoke. This one's called A Confession. When my dogs started rewriting my poems, they got better. They suddenly possessed the ineffable whiff of multivalent scents, milked from the breeze by a wet black nose, the ear-flapping joy of open car windows, the quivering willingness to lick the ones you barely know but sense that you might one day love. The squirrel imagery grew more pungent, more necessary. The piercing musk of unbathed human flesh rose sharp as wine intermingled with uncured salami. And when the pages closed at last, you had only to follow the circle of your own steps before collapsing into an untroubled sleep. My dog's name is Zeus. My son named him when he was a puppy 10 and a half years ago. My son, we were reading Percy Jackson, The Olympians. He was a big fan of mythology. He didn't, the dog's mother was a golden retriever, but the dog's father was a miniature poodle mutt mix. So the name was far more ambitious than this 38-pound dog has become. But it's kind of sweet that he hasn't been able to grow into it. This is called Our Bodies. Just 2 more short poems. Our bodies. We used to ditch them after school, dropping them on the lush grass that grew where the trestle bridge crossed the creek, and everything smelled of fish and tarred timber. And we sank to the silty bottom of the stream, and we stared up through the rusty water for hours, without worrying about breathing. And when trains rumbled overhead, raining gravel and cinders down into the creek, we did not blink. Afterward, we crept back to where our bodies lay tangled in the grass, as still as steamed fish on a plate, and we peered into our empty eyes, then climbed back into our skins and felt heavy at first and too thick. And sometimes you would even cry a little on the way home. And when I try to comfort you, you'd say, "No, it's okay. Sometimes it just hits me this way, living inside a body." In this last poem, I was doing a reading of the Popol Vuh in Phoenix at a place called Changing Hands Bookstore, which is a lovely store. And they hosted me so nicely, but they hadn't banked on the fact that it was spring break at Arizona State. And there were 30 chairs set out. I think 5 people showed up. And so, we made a little circle, and it was kind of an intimate gathering. And I could tell the woman at the bookstore felt a little bad, but she said, "Well, one thing we do here is we give you any book you want in the store. That's how we offer an honorarium to our readers." And I was reading in front of the poetry section, and I had just seen that Robert Bly's collected works, that beautiful hardcover, which had just come out. And I think I ran over to it and picked it up. And I I wrote this poem after Robert Bly, after a poem of his that I'd never read before, a very little poem. But I'm grateful to him for writing it. And it's called Tell Me Again. Tell me about the sound of the wind in the pines, the cushioned duff, the needles that make a clean floor and bring a hush to the understory. Tell me how deer come here at night to curl into ovals, how they dream of windfall apples. a scent like wine. How when they dream of wolves, their hooves kick out like knives. I can see the tamped outlines of their beds, where they scuffle into needles that cling to them like fine red parentheses. Tell me how at nightfall I split in two, and the other half of me comes here to these trunks, where I lie among the deer, and the sides of our bodies barely touch with every rising breath. Thanks so much, folks. Thanks, Mimi, for having me.
Gosh, I get to be thanked. Thanks again, Michael. That was great. That was wonderful. I'm transported. I think maybe we all are. Mary Kay Rummel's 9th poetry book, Nocturnes, Between Flesh and Stone, has just been published by Blue Light Press of San Francisco. This is her inaugural, this is her launch reading. And I guess she did another launch reading at Midstream too. So this Midstream and Mary Kay go back. Her books have won awards from New Rivers Press, Bright Hill Press, and Blue Light Press. She is co-editor of Psalms of Cinder and Silt, Poems about Experiences with Fires in California, Solo Novo Press. A professor emerita from the University of Minnesota Duluth, she recently retired from California State University, Channel Islands. She and her husband, Tim, divide their time between Minneapolis and Ventura, California, where she is a former poet laureate of Ventura County. Mary Kay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, readers, both of you. Just great. It's like you planned this. I mean, the readers, we seem to, it was like right on the same wavelength. So I do appreciate it. I do appreciate Midstream. And as I said, this is the second time that I've had a reading scheduled 2 days after a book arrived. And so I'm excited to, I'm going to read from my new book. And it's, this is a picture. It's hard to see online, but it's got this is sunset at, in Malibu by painter Charlie Karp, who actually I met when I was teaching. He was from Duluth and lives in California now. But anyway, so I'm going to, I just have to say, I'm just kind of blown away by seeing all these faces online, all these people that I haven't seen for months. It's like, I just want to say, oh, let's get together. So this is just the weirdest thing. I mean, there are a lot of people here who I just love, and that I miss so much being in the same room with. So thank you for coming. It's just great. Family and friends, and it's just great. Anyway, so I'm going to read, and one of the big themes of this book really is what I call the search for the divine feminine, meaning like sort of the feminine in the world, in the past, and now. And so I'm going to read the first poem in the book, which is part of that. And it's called Illuminator Dreams. And I've always been really interested in medieval illuminations, one of my big, passions. And I was driving in the car and I heard on public radio that they had discovered a body of a nun in northern Germany, and from 11th century, and it was preserved, and they had found blue like ink from lapis lazuli in her teeth, and that was proof that there were women who did these illuminations, these artists from medieval times. And I always knew that. I always knew, looking at those, that there had to be women who were doing those, but they had no way of knowing it. So this poem is my poem for this nun whose body they found. Illuminator Dreams. An 11th century nun in northern Germany, scribe and painter. She copies the gospel in a tower among oak branches. She dreams of light falling across the page, shining through the leaves, drawing her in, and she writes a story beneath the story. Painting her dream light, she learns underneath is more, too much light to see in the margins of the world. With a hard tip brush, she dips into ultramarine, made from crushed lapis lazuli, paints on calfskin, rests the tiny brush in her mouth, wets it, readying herself to paint Mary's blue gown. Her painting, like the scribble of rain on the lake's wide page, breaking off light, breaking off when the light moves on. She follows deeper, weary, inside the womb of rock, of rain. She dreams of lapis stones carried from Afghanistan by merchants along the Great Silk Road, stones worth more than gold. Once she sat in sunlight near a waterfall, and once she sang near the southern sea. This is her story now, and the light is hers forever. In 1,000 years, another woman will find flecks of lapis in the nun's stone teeth, nested like tiny blue robin eggs. And the archaeologist that found her was a woman. So she comes again in some other poems. That story just really blew me away. And the second poem is on the same theme, and it's from here. I'm going to show you this. This is a little statue of the mother goddess on her throne, which is, I saw the original in the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations in Ankara, Turkey. And I just love it. Like, look at her buttocks, and there's a baby coming out between her legs. And I just love that statue. So I wrote this poem, Finding Her, Mother Goddess on her throne, 5,750 BC. No more than terracotta, warmed earth smell, her thick body on a little clay throne. Breasts like large loaves, buttocks like melons. She is flanked on each side by sacred lion animals. Her hands, their heads, a melding of woman and beast. Her belly protrudes, it softens. A child's head emerges from between her thighs. Paleolithic mother goddess, thunderheart of the land of us all. Before Aphrodite, older than Artemis, her face lifts as she listens to her own music. Hair piled on her head, small nose, enduring mouth, shored up against ruin, against history. She is for walking toward, through sage, heat, locust, war. Her gravity reminds me of my great-grandmother Josephine in an old portrait. Black Irish hair coiled, wine dark sea eyes, body conformed to a hive. Found whole, surrounded by ancient fragments of a puzzle, humming an ancient note. Listen, they both say. Do you want to hear all the women resting inside us, in dirt, rock, chant, dark? I have traveled so far to find her memory. The other thing I discovered as I read this book that I didn't even know was a theme till I got the book, except I should have been able to tell from the title, but is how the whole, almost everything poem in the book was inspired by sound of some kind. And all these different kinds of sound, music and birds. And I must have been listening a lot for some reason. And that went into the title, The Nocturnes, and it was fine. I didn't even know it until I started reading it. But this poem is called Nocturne in Blue. I took the title from that. And I heard Joshua Bell play a transcription of Chopin, Nocturne No. 2, his transcription on the violin. And it was so beautiful. And that's what inspired this poem, this notion of going from one to the other to the other. Nocturne in Blue. His violin carries me to Paris, where I walk alone in twilight shimmer, as street lamps, bridges shine with rain, fog rising from the Seine. The past is a stone in my hand. I finger it as evening deepens, plant myself on Pont de la Tournelle. Watch the back of Notre Dame as the sky shifts through layers of blue. Darkness shrouds the cathedral. Even after the great fire, the flat, dark skeletons of its buttresses fly, softened by leafing plane trees. I'm not alone here. On the bank of the bridge, Saint Geneviève lays her hands on the shoulders of a child, a young Paris, city she once protected from the Huns. We're not strangers. At 18, I was given her name, aching to become Holy Sister Genevieve. I, who never left St. Paul, prayed to the protector of Paris, begging her to guide me on sleepless convent nights. She looks through 16 centuries down on me again, no longer laboring to be holy. Joshua Bell's violin distills blue from Chopin's notes for piano. The musk of centuries, gathering dusk, a surge of strings against the night. Past, present, future, one smooth stone. And the next poem it's a memory poem, and it started with the sound of a bell. And it takes place at St. James Elementary School, where I went to school, down in Randolph in West 7th. There is a bell inside this memory, and a hand that rings it. There's a playground of children squeezed between red brick school and sandstone church, lining up by our sizes, and I am always in the front as we tumble and march through the doors of classrooms opening into wainscoted halls. It's a kind of relief to come in, jumpers, twirlers, shouters. For those who played, and those like me who played at playing, for those who watched walking laps at the edge of the schoolyard, we all seem to float away like leaves turning in the wind. It's good we are warming our desks again, such cold little desks, screwed down to the floor. How good and sleepy we feel to know what we know. The young nun will push her veil from her face. The small hands on the clock will slowly circle, and the thick brown shoes we've kept tied all day will take us home, through streets freshly tarred, through scraggly empty lots, lilac bushes, bridal wreath, and yards where grass will not grow, to our small crowded houses fastened firmly to the earth. I remember my great-grandfather in his corner, lost in the smell of drifting pipe tobacco. And later the moon hiding from me behind trees, the pattern of leaves on its face. I come from the sound of the bell and lace of broken moonlight. Where else would I belong? So that's to St. James. This is another one, memory based on songs. I was a little older in this one. The songs for John Berryman. We passed one day on the steps of Lind Hall. You late for class, wild hair, glasses askew. I was just out of the convent, new in graduate school, books bouncing on my back as I ran down Church Street to join the marchers. 5,000 strong on Washington Avenue, they sang, we shall overcome. And then began the chant, that frightened me. Ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh is gonna win. I couldn't sing that because those jungles hid my youngest brother. At home, I opened dream songs, blown away by your impertinent piety. Iambic, the only verse I knew until you brought me ear to ear with a new scripture. And this is from him. A Buddhist doused in the streets, serenely burned. The Secretary of State for War, winking it over, screwed a red-haired whore. Monsignor Capovilla mourned, what a week. You needled me, wheedled me, not with beauty, but scarifying image. Singe created in all night drunks, bruised, raging blues, your book of revelations. I wanted some of that wildness in me. As your songs freed my lines, my fears, your music moved in me. How could I resist? I was learning sex and poetry. 3 years later, your body hit the rocks below the river bridge I walked across. My brother in the hospital. My country was still bombing Vietnam to kingdom come. It kind of reminds me of this time. It's like we got through it. Let's. So my last poem I wrote in response to early, like in March, at the beginning of the pandemic, Andrea Bocelli sang in a video. He sang in Milan Cathedral, and as he was singing, they showed all these empty cities around the world, these great cities just totally empty, and it blew me away. I think I watched it about 10 times and cried every time I watched it. So I wrote this poem in response to that, and I dedicated it to my husband. In a time of distancing, for Tim. Sometimes I just want to touch you when I'm caught in the honeyed notes of the cello, or hearing the chorus of gulls quarrel at low tide feast, the drumming of surf in their throats. I live in the silence between notes, between whistle cries of the finches and the cesura of being present. The world wants to be loved. Andrea Bocelli sings for us in hollow glitter of Milan Cathedral. On the steps in front of soaring doors and statues of the saved, he sings, I was blind, but now I see. While videos of cities without people flash on screen. The Seine with no bookstalls, Trafalgar with no traffic, Times Square, a crazy tunnel echoing the in-your-face circus was. The space between Tibetan Bowl moon and lavender sea buzzes with ions. In the opera of what we're living through, you help me stay grounded when stars call. I touch you in the spaces of my longing. That's it. Thank you. Love you, everybody.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mary Kay. Wow. Okay, we have one more time. Thank you. It's hard to make a shift. Stanley. I gotta find my paper. Stanley Kusunoki has published 3 poetry collections from North Star Press of St. Cloud, 180 Days, Reflections and Observations of a Teacher, and Items in the News, and from Polaris Press, an imprint of North Star, Shelter in Place, Poems in a Time of COVID-19. That's coming out any day. He has taught youth creative writing through the Loft, Asian American Renaissance, Intermedia Arts, and SASE The Right Place. He received a Loft Asian Inroads mentorship. Also, a Minnesota State Arts Board Cultural Collaboration Grant to create, write, and perform Beringia, the Land Bridge Project, with Ojibwe performance poet Jameson Motto. Kusunoki is the host curator of the Bridges reading series at Next Chapter Booksellers, and was the high potential coordinator at Shakopee's Red Oak Elementary School, a teacher. He lives in St. Paul with his wife, Claudia Daly. Stanley, welcome.
Yep, thank you. Is this better now?
It's better.
Okay, all right, sorry about that. But anyway, I'm reading from Shelter in Place. And basically it was written from the time the schools first shut down until the governor gave the sort of safe open back in like May 18th. And so this is shut down. The school is not happy. Too quiet. A few footsteps today, but not the thundering packs of fifth graders, chattering third graders, skip dancing kindergartners. No, everything muted at a muted pace. Teachers nonplussed, upset in hushed groups. 6 feet away from each other, please. Everywhere it is wait and see. In a place where it is movement, chatter, always something. The school sulks, yearning for a quick death to microorganisms and a quick return of its heartbeat. Thank you. And so what happened was when they figured that they needed to close down the schools, there was actually a week where there were no kids, and we teachers were supposed to do these series of modules to help us learn how to teach online. And it was, as you can imagine, pretty tedious. So shut down, part 3. This is not school. It is unschool. No bell to mark the ins and outs. Too quiet. No children's chatter, no passage of classes. Time disjointed, marked by clicking. Move to another instruction module. Click, break, walk around the block. More modules. Now, it's the interruptions that are the relief. Google Meet with a teacher pal, emails from parents, a photobomb from a 5th grader, connections. And of course, part of the writing is, it's not all about school, but you know, after a while you have to go out and get groceries. And that presented new challenges in the time of COVID. Oh, shoot. Risk takes on a new definition, limiting time, shopping, and proximity to others, forgetting items more than just exasperation, another trip, another mask used up, another venture into potential exposure. Even with lists and checking twice, consulting what we can get in one place instead of several, limiting door handles, even numbers of bags, seems good. Preventative maintenance. We get home and still it's, oh shoot. Of course, in these days, it's not just oh shoot that has altered understanding. The other word with heightened meaning, even more dubious and dire in implication. Seems. Prep. It seems that we all have nothing but time. but that would be a huge misconception. Scanning, uploading, downloading, saving files all takes extra time, and making videos when everything is working. A download and upload gets it where it needs to be. Of course, everything does not work all the time. In the first week, Schoology and Seesaw go down, and that's before all the rest of us on spring break come back online. Like the rule of thumb for broadcast production, each minute on the air is an hour of production time. Add in online meetings, checking the redos, time for a mental health break and a walk. It's a whole day's work and more if you count the hours of lost sleep. It's 24/7 prep time. Payback. That's why we do it. Even though through coronavirus, computer crashes, work and more work, the last day of the quarter, Google Meet. And oh, the children, their faces, energized voices, stumbling over each other like the waters at Gooseberry Falls, tumbling with ideas and follow-ups, the flashes of neurons like the photos at the Oscars. And all in an hour of contained chaos. You forget the detritus of a week where nothing seemed to work, and every corner presented another conundrum. This is payback for not enough pay and too many hours and a waiting partner across town. This is something the 1% will never know. This something gets us off our backs, dusting ourselves off, and waking early. Kay and Clyde, will you go down, excuse me just a sec, and get my white binder from by the computer? Okay, so I'm going back to Mary. The music has been a part of writing during COVID, and just like Andrea Bocelli, there's been this spontaneous group of musicians just going out from the balconies in Italy to the Mayo Clinic and just giving their gift of music to the world. And so that has been an inspiration for me. And one of the big inspirations is my friend Denny Bonet from when I was in West Virginia at a show called Mountain State. She was the band's violinist. And so during COVID, almost every week or every other week, she's been doing a live concert from her apartment in New York City. And so she was a big influence on me. And so I said, well, Denny can do it. I'm not so good, but I can do something. So concerts. From the Mayo Clinic to the local orchestras, rockers and folkies, everyone spills out the music onto YouTube, Zoom, Google Meets, Facebook, putting out more than just distraction. It is sharing hope and giving joy. So, Denny, again, on Good Friday's evening, the darkest time of the Christian year, she plays, dances, sings, invites us into her place, her soul of music. Never mind the technical glitches. It is the communal joy, seeing the comments scroll on the sidebar from places like Brazil, France, Australia, all in this space. Hey now, don't dream it's over, Denny sings, and we concur. Inspired, on Saturday, music stand on the porch, Claudia makes a drink, hauls out plastic chairs for would-be attendees, and songs go out into the neighborhood. Passerby, even kid down the block, not sure what to make of it all. But the neighbors, they clap and cheer, not so much the high caliber of the singing, or even the brash voice of the 12-string. It is pumping the fist at the disease, the joining of voices, our inoculation, and at the end, we are Warren Zevon's werewolves, howling in unison at COVID. This is our hood, our territory. You best stay away, far away. Ow! So there we go. I'll just have two more short poems that I've just written. So you are the first one to hear these. They are post-election. And this one is called The Statue. The statue in New York's harbor needs a bath. She feels sullied. 4 years and more of rants and tweets and executive orders have been like seagulls' guano on the promise at her base. She has winced as her adopted country torn apart, no longer e pluribus unum, but unum, unum, unum only of the man who would be emperor. She covers her face with her dimming torch as the president lashes out at allies, at the people who gave her as a gift to the young and promising republic that now brims with swastikas and semi-automatic rifles. She can only hope this election will be a showerhead, flushing with full power the sewage out of the Capitol, rinsing the hate and division, cleaning the country so that once again she can raise her head and proclaim her name without feeling like a lie. Thank you. And I'll end on a little more up note, sleep easy. I will sleep easy tonight. The promise of calm and decency restored. You hear it across the world. Yes, from democratic leaders, yes, the revelers in Times Square, but listen, there's so much more. The animals, less danger of extinction, nestled more snugly now. The earth itself sighs, rivers imagining running clear, the air currents carrying the message, relax, no need for storming about. The forests already sending out hopeful green shoots. Sleep easy, peoples and animals, sky and dirt and flowing water. There is yet hope for restoration, all made whole again.
Stanley Kusunoki. Well, that's it. That's our program, everybody. I will name our readers again. Frank Wharton, of course, on the flute, and then Arleta Little, Michael Bazzett, Mary Kay Rummel, Stanley Kusunoki. Please unmute and make noise.